Mae Sot is actually inside Thailand, alongside the Thai-Burma border, very close to Burma, but exactly inside Thailand. Because of the civil war inside Burma, quite a lot of refugees or migrants flee to Mae Sot, and also a couple of the other border towns along the Thai-Burma border. And the UNHCR decide to set up some refugee camps, 10 in total, along the Thai-Burma border to cater the need of these migrants or refugees. And some migrants or refugees, they decide not to stay inside refugee camp because there's not much for them to do, and there's basically no jobs for them inside the refugee camps. So that's why they decide to stay in the border town, for example, Mae Sot. So there are quite a lot of Burmese migrants or refugees residing in Mae Sot. And the Thai government didn't do much to take care of these people because technically they're illegal to stay there. But they decide to turn a blind eye on these situations because these migrants or refugees also provide quite a lot of cheap labor for the factories in the Thai-Burma border. So that's why they allowed them to stay there, but didn't do much for them. So the refugees or the migrants community, they have to provide some public service on their own for their people. We have set up Connecting Myanmar for 2 years already. And our focus will be the connections between Hong Kong people, mainly university students, and the students inside Burma, as well as those students alongside the Thai-Burma border. We believe by strengthening these kind of connections, a lot of things can be better. And also, our universities are learning quite a lot of different stuff in, for example, Hong Kong U or CU. Some are doing law studies, some are doing journalism training. So they both have some pretty important skills, and the significance might be overlooked in Hong Kong. But I believe those kind of skills can be very useful in other parts of the world. So I decided to set up different sort of programs to connect different university students. For example, if you're talking about law students in Hong Kong U, we arrange them to do legal research in Yangon for some human rights training organizations, and to provide them with some suggestions about their constitution modifications or improvements. If you're born in Mae Sot, then your life is probably predetermined, and very likely you're going to be stuck in Mae Sot, or the other way will be going back to Burma. But the thing is, for those children or young people who are born in Mae Sot is their home. Technically or racially they are Burmese, but asking them to move back to Burma is like asking them to go to a strange place. Some of them have never been to Burma, so it's a bit weird. And we've seen in recent years, the Thai government has been pushing some of the migrants or refugees back to Burma. So it creates quite a lot of trouble. And for those who are doing very good in terms of their academic results, they might get a chance to go to overseas university if they get some scholarship support. I met some migrant students in Mae Sot, and they've been born in Karen state, one of the ethnic minority states in between Thailand and Burma, but inside Burma. And they told me some stories that the Karen army did some really bad stuff to their family. Also, the Burmese government did the same as well. And they are receiving education in Mae Sot right now. Some of them are pretty bright, so they might have an opportunity to go to overseas for further educations. But when I asked them, what do you want to do after you receive that kind of further education? Almost all of them told me they want to go back to their hometown or home country. And asked them, what are you going to do there? Since there are no jobs, no proper jobs for university graduates. And they just told me they want to go back to their village, and they want to be the leader of that village and try to improve life there. So that's quite memorable. And for the majority of the provider of the necessity goods, it will be UNHCR, but also the local NGO would help them to distribute the resources and to help them to manage the people inside the camp. They set up some sort of camp committee comprised of the local Burmese people and also the Thai people as well. And for most of the local NGOs, what they do is to provide training for the people there. For the resettlement policy, of course, there are many NGOs working on that, pressing the Thai government on slowing down the resettlement projects, and also many human rights agencies working on trying to improve the situation in Burma. One example would be the Karen Human Rights Group, who has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize before. And they focus on the Karen situation, the human rights situation in the border. And yeah, different NGOs will try to tackle this problem from different angles, some from the human rights perspective, some from the environmental perspective. Back in the 30 or 40 years ago, not that many INGOs are working in the Thai-Burma border. They basically have to set up their own local NGOs to support their own people. That's how they begin. And throughout this year, they have been getting quite a lot of attention in the international community and also bringing in more and more resources for their own people. So I would say they're definitely doing a good job. One example would be education NGO called BMWEC, Burmese Migrant Worker Education Committee. They have been providing migrant educations to those Burmese young children or migrants who has been residing in the Thai-Burma border. But what we also see is that the situation is getting more difficult because everyone in the world knows that Burma is opening up. And so many people want to support the people in Burma, but seems like many people forgot there's still a group of people residing in Thailand. So what we see is the resources is flowing into the country, but not more on the border situations. So these local NGOs, they are getting less and less funding, and same for the INGO as well. They decide to move their resources from the border area to inside the country. We might be a little bit too optimistic about what UNHCR can do. And very likely their actions are kind of restricted by the other countries. For example, in terms of the resettlement project, UNHCR is not actually receiving the migrants or refugees. They have to depend on the third countries to receive the refugees. And I'm pretty sure if the other countries are willing to accept those migrants or refugees, UNHCR are more than happy to do the middleman work. But of course, UNHCR is a bit too big as well, so we do encounter some sort of bureaucracy. In the future, I'm not sure if these people doesn't fit the economic incentive of Thailand. I'm not that sure the government would be allowing these people to integrate to the local community for the sake of humanity. If you're talking about the culture of Burma, it's already a quite complicated stories because actually there are quite lots of different people in Burma in terms of their ethnicity or racial. We got about 7 major ethnic minority groups of people already, and also the Burma people. And in terms of their lifestyles or culture, they are already quite different with each other, not to mention to compare Burma and Thailand. And for the majority of the provider of the necessity goods, it will be UNHCR, but also the local NGO would help them to distribute the resources and to help them to manage the people inside the camp. They set up some sort of camp committee comprised of the local Burmese people and also the Thai people as well. And for most of the local NGOs, what they do is to provide training for the people there. I guess ultimately, people should have their own say about whether they should want to stay or want to go back. But if we want the Burmese people to go back, no matter you are Thai government or Burmese government, what you want to do is probably not to push the people going back, but to try to improve the situations in those ethnic minority states. If the situation are better, I'm pretty sure the elder group of the Burmese migrants, they would like to go back since they are very likely to be born inside those ethnic minority states, and very likely they will bring along their children and their son. So what I would suggest is to improve the situation inside Burma, but at the same time we also can't forget to provide the necessary support to those who are deciding to stay in the border area, at least for now.